Thanks, Greg. So we've got a few minutes to have a Q&A and throw it to the floor now. So any questions for any of our panelists, for TJ, Elizabeth, or Greg? We'll start right in the back row.
The carbon tax, is that national Canada or is it provincial?
Alberta imposed carbon tax.
BC has a carbon tax. Do all the provinces, and is there any commonality in how they approach the carbon tax?
From my understanding, there is no commonality at the moment. I think the federal government is investigating a commonality, and I think what it seems is they might be looking to the U.S. to see what happens here first.
Don't wait for us.
Just quickly on the carbon tax, I believe in Alberta that's a tax on largest industrial producers of carbon dioxide. It's at $15 a ton.
$15.
It's basically they went across the province, found the largest producers, said you've got a choice. You can either reduce it or pay a tax, and that tax goes into research. The BC tax is more of a retail tax. It's on your gasoline. It's on your any product that has energy that goes into it that's carbon reduction. So they're very different tax regimes.
For Elizabeth, you talked about high solids and low solids. Can you talk about that in English? What does that mean?
Sure. Yeah, so low solids is, like I said, it's in North America. It's not anything that's very shocking, and it's what you would see at a wastewater treatment facility, a dairy farm. And basically when we say low solids, we're talking really liquid waste, pumpable waste. It's maybe 10% solids. The rest of it is liquid. So, you can let your mind imagine what I'm talking about. On the high solid side, that's anywhere from 35 to 50% solids, and basically that material is considered stackable. So a front end loader with a big scoop can actually move that material around. It's not a sloppy mess. And so that is really the stuff that's in that food scrap bin over there, right? It's the stuff that you're putting out on your curb, the stuff that a restaurant would produce. And in BC in particular, and here in Seattle, San Francisco, you're probably familiar with that as well. There is more and more diversion from those sources, not just the liquid sources. And so this is a technology that's suited to handle that kind of material.
For TJ, I was wondering about your remediation systems. Are your contracts for months or years or in perpetuity? Like, how long are these systems going to be in place that you're putting in these remote areas?
Yeah, there's both. So the first project I talked about was just a permanently installed system, and it's a capital equipment and capital improvement to that facility. The second one was a pilot project. Our typical pilot projects, essentially a proof of concept, lasts for about 3 to 9 months, depending on the scope of the pilot, and then that would also be for consideration for a capital purchase. We do some remediation. Kind of the longest term project I'd say we've done is maybe 3-year lease, but we do either. It just depends on the market. Our bigger projects that we're looking at internationally are mostly 12-month pilot, proof of concept, large capital purchase afterwards.
On the beginning slide, you listed areas that we are talking about, countries and are working on, and one of them was climate change that you listed. Can you tell us a little more about any kind of discussion? How are those? Is that subject to being approached by both countries? Is there a entity that's taking this on, or communicating back and forth, or how? Is there a way we're starting to work in the same direction, or is it still too early?
It's still, it's definitely a work in progress. We've got a very large dedicated group at our embassy in Washington who are on this file, so they've taken the lead on negotiations with the U.S. And a lot of that will be wrapped up in things like the new Trans-Pacific Partnership, how we approach things as a block, if you want, vis-a-vis what we see out in the Asia-Pacific corridor. So it's, I think that we get a sense over the last 2 years that Canada and the U.S. are actually thinking more along the same lines. There was a time when the sense in Canada, I would say back in the mid, say, 2003 to 2007 timeframe, the sense that we were kind of slipping apart in terms of our understanding of how we're going to work together. But what we're hearing now is that there's kind of a renewed enthusiasm for Canada and the U.S. working together in this area. But it is a very slow-moving train. There's a lot of elements that go into it, and I don't know if we're going to see any concrete results on that for a while. But the general trend is very positive. The two administrations get along quite well together.
Well, sort of along the same line, it's because the U.S. does not have a national energy policy that is working on leadership level at any rate, as far as direction. It's interesting always then to see the way markets break out and regulations are either different or somehow you're not operating technically as a complete market. When you look at our country and your country, our West Coast's kind of line up there with a lot of stuff that, as you pointed out, the trade back and forth. So on the energy front, are we also not just accidentally or under the radar beginning to act as a major market with Canada and the United States and our West Coast states? Or are we actually operating as a market? It's an official market.
Well, we're certainly if you look at the electricity component of the energy market, we're fully here. Flows back and forth, and that happens on a north-south corridor basis right across the border areas. You see that back in the East Coast, New York State, and Quebec and Ontario. And you certainly see it here between BC and Washington, Oregon, and California. Very integrated in terms of their ability to move distributed energy around at different times. So, I think that's kind of just a natural progression of how things are. A lot of people would argue that there is a lot more in common between North, South, U.S., Canada, than, say, East, West, U.S., for example. And having lived here now for a year, having spent my last 4 years in Princeton on the East Coast, now moving here, I get a strong sense of that as well. There's just a lot more commonality here. It's very easy for people to think along the same lines, certainly on this side of the Cascade Mountains.
TJ, you talked about the issues you had moving equipment across the border. Could you just elaborate on that a little bit? Did they want proof that you bought it in the U.S.? That it was from here?
There was a couple things. So one, you've got just there was the tariff fee, right, that I talked about, and that kind of, how do we get around that, and the idea of actually the client hiring their own carrier to drive down to the, our facility in Everett, pick up the box, and drive it back up themselves, instead of us hiring a carrier and saying, hey, we're delivering this to that person, was kind of, they weren't quite sure about that. So that really seemed to solve all of our problems when we found that change. And then it was pretty easy. So,
yeah. I'm curious. I don't know that much about trade policy and all, but trade agreements. But after hearing TJ and Elizabeth talk about the challenges of going back and forth across the border and issues like that, what has NAFTA done for us from the standpoint of making trade free and easy and all that? I'm just curious.
Is us being Americans or us being Canadians?
North America.
North America. It's the whole NAFTA. You're going to hear a lot. Well, in Canada, we're going to hear a lot more about it because it is the 20th anniversary now. So there's going to be a lot of, of analyses being done in terms of what the relative benefits have been for each country. A very strong sense in Canada going into it was trepidation that the U.S. was just going to murder us. We're just going to get a whack to because the elephant next to the mouse and we didn't have much of an alternative there. But it's been very good for Canada. It's been actually quite good for the U.S. If you look at aggregate trade numbers, if that was the impetus for that free trade agreement, I think it could have done very, very well. So, 9/11 came in and just sort of kiboshed a lot of things. Now we've got this whole security aspect, and that was something that was completely off the table back in 1994, a new reality. So I would say, absent the North American Free Trade Agreement, I think the post-9/11 world would have been a lot more deleterious to both sides. But the U.S. has done very well with the North American Free Trade Agreement. It's so integrated now. We have components that flow back and forth across in the aerospace sector, certainly the automotive sector. Your typical car will have parts that would cross that border 7 or 8 times before it actually gets to final assembly. And the just-in-time procedures they have in place, it makes a lot of sense. So it's certainly smooth the edges off on the modern industry. And I think we sort of are keeping moving that way. So in the US, it'll be interesting to see what kind of a summary comes out